Welcome back to the Scare Stick Podcast. This is your host, Mike, and my co-host, Scott. How are you doing today, my friend?
Doing good. Good start to my day. Early on.
Good jokes. So today we're going to be discussing Black Christmas for our Christmas episode.
I'm going to be releasing it on Christmas, too. So
oh, sick.
It'd be nice to have it be a good thing for people to sit at home and say, hey, what the fuck, dude?
Let's listen to two dumbasses ramble on about a movie for an hour.
Hopefully.
Maybe just one dumbass.
Hopefully an hour, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't ramble on too long.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to get caught up talking a lot about this movie just because of how good it is, and also how just it's just one of those movies where like you're watching. I wouldn't say every frame. I feel like that's a little bit excessive, but like every scene has something in it that I think is very distinct that you can kind of just like talk about. There's little talking points all throughout the movie.
I think it's one of those self-explanatory films that, you know, we might not be able to discuss a whole lot about it, but it's one of those films that if you experience, you understand everything that like you're listening to or people are talking about. Because, you know, I know when I hadn't seen it, we talk about it before, and I didn't really have a huge interest in it besides like, oh, I heard it's good, but the words "it's good" from a variety of different people mean nothing in a grand scheme of things unless you're very interested or have something dragging you towards something. Yeah. And until I saw it, I couldn't understand how good it really was, or just how well made or how interesting the concept turned out to be, especially in its time period. And I don't want the entire episode just be gushing about this is so good, but I feel like that's what's gonna end up happening, because that's just gonna be how it is.
Yeah, I do think that, like, to a degree, within our community, you know, the horror community, this is a very celebrated movie that I think most people in the community have probably seen by now.
Yes.
But I think that the nice thing about this movie is, unlike something like Halloween or The Exorcist or something that, or Psycho, which is, you know, there's storied films that are big mainstream kind of, you know, incredible movies that most people have probably seen. I think that Black Christmas is still in that cult classic. Surprisingly,
it's a cult classic, yeah.
It's surprising considering it has 2 remakes.
Mm-hmm.
But the original, I feel, is still very underseen. It's not that people in our community don't talk about it. We talk about it all the time. But, you know, I'll talk to someone and say, like, Black Christmas is incredible. You know, it's a predecessor to Halloween, all these things. And they'll be like, yeah, I haven't seen the 70s one. So it's like they always see the remake, but I don't hear people outside of our bubble talk about it nearly as much. So I feel like of the like big powerhouse movies we've talked about on the podcast, this is kind of one of the ones that we can talk about a little bit more.
I think if you've gone out of your way to find Black Christmas and you watch one of the remakes, that's disgusting. Like, I don't get me wrong, I haven't seen them, but there's something about watching remakes of films or newer versions of films that you know existed from like the 70s and 80s or that time period, and just being like, I'm gonna watch the new one. Like, that just pisses me off. Like, I can't understand the mindset of that, or almost anything in a modern decade for remaking films. What version of those type of films have been better? What have they taken from the decade it came from and said, hey, we're going to improve upon it? Especially if it's from 2006.
Yeah. Like mid-2000s garbage.
It'd take me maybe 5 to 10 minutes to find 5 good movies from 2006.
Yeah. I think that, so I mean, there's a couple of movies where I've seen the remake before I've seen the original.
I think, but like, if it comes down to like, you aren't looking for Black Christmas, or you're growing up and something's just on, or like you go to the theaters and it's what's playing and it's the only thing you're gonna see, it's different. But like, if you're actively looking for, hey, I want to watch Black Christmas, people talk about it, I'm gonna watch the new one, it's kind of gross.
Well, having seen the 2006 one, yes, that is gross. That movie, I really, really just do not like that movie. But it is the polar opposite of this movie, honestly, as a remake. It is everything this movie is not. This movie is lower key. It's much more in your head. It's, got a faceless killer we never meet. It's all these things, and the friggin' remake is, we know exactly who Billy is. We know exactly who Agnes is. There's blood and gore all over the place, and the backstories for Billy and Agnes are explicitly told, and they are fucking nauseating.
Well,
So
that's kind of why you can't do Black Christmas again, because you have to ask yourself, what can you do differently? You know what I mean? Like, that's different. And if you're not gonna do anything different, what's the point of making the film again? Just watch the original.
yeah, it's nice.
It's such a
nice that
standalone film. You can't really delve into it any deeper.
Yeah, it's nice that they did their own thing. It's just that what they did is gross.
Yeah.
Like, it's a pretty movie, and that's the best praise I can give it.
You watched the newest remake, do you, haven't you?
No.
Oh, you haven't?
Nope, I have not bothered. I'm not gonna get up here on a soapbox and talk about, putting politics in movies, because get over it. It's in movies. They've always been.
The original's a very political film for when it came out.
Oh yeah. So I'm not gonna be that guy, but just from the trailers, it doesn't look like Black Christmas. It doesn't even look like it resembles Black Christmas, based just on the plot. There's a cult and all these things. It doesn't even sound like the same franchise. So it's like, why is this even Black Christmas? Doesn't even seem like Billy's in it. Whatever. But
I know the marketing for it was showing a lot of strong female characters, and that's like the main grasp to the movie.
Yeah.
Which is fine and all.
Oh yeah.
I think there's something about how, as a modern viewer, to view a strong female woman, though, they have to be like a superwoman. You know what I mean? Like, they have to do like this crazy shit that makes them ridiculous. It's the same way we viewed like stuff like Schwarzenegger and Stallone in the 80s. Like, they're not just strong men. They're fucking like they're gods among men. Like, the shit they get away with.
I do think those at times, though, like those kinds of movies have a certain tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I don't think we have that
its
nowadays.
Ridiculousness. Yeah, it knows its ridiculousness.
There's a cheese factor where it's like, when they're throwing out one-liners, you can only take it so seriously. Don't get me wrong, a lot of modern males do not understand the fact that it's tongue-in-cheek, and they think this is just how men should be. They're kind of lost on the joke. But, for women nowadays, I feel like we're getting to that level where we're getting these type of, like, overly strong females where, like, it's not tongue-in-cheek as much, and I think it's not really beneficial to, like, look at how Black Christmas deals with a strong woman in 74, the original. It's like the main lead is a very strong, independent woman that just would exist in the real world. Like, it's not like she is fucking creating her own fucking mecha death weapon to fight anybody that's gonna get in her way, or she fucking bench presses 300 pounds being like, I'm unstoppable, I am the female force. I think it's just weird how, like, there's for male and females, like, to make a strong character nowadays, or just like before with like the 80s and stuff, like, there's such like a hyper realistic factor to how strong they are, where it's like, now women are just all Sarah Connor, and men are just all Schwarzenegger from like fucking Commando.
Yeah, I think that, I have no problem with movies that have that kind of I don't like using the term agenda, because agenda is now a bad word on the internet, but have that kind of, like, we want to make our main characters empowered and strong and fighting people and like action stars or whatever. That shit doesn't bother me. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
But I think that, at least, again, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't say that in the movie it doesn't work. But the trailers just felt kind of like very in your face, like, very loud
it
about
could
it.
be tongue-in-cheek in the film, we
Maybe it
don't
is.
have any film to go off of. We're talking about the trailers.
And maybe the movie's more subdued too. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And if all 4 of those characters were guys, I would still find it really weird.
I'd say it's just as bad.
So like it's also like the sense of like the tone from the trailers just feels very grating about it too. So it's really weird to watch that when you know what the original is like. It doesn't seem like, again, like if that was not called Black Christmas, I feel like I probably just wouldn't care. I would just not watch it.
Yeah.
But it's called Black Christmas and it feels really weird because it just doesn't look like it resembles anything like Black Christmas, other than that they're sorority girls. It's the only thing that looks like it's...
From taking it from a disinterest, you would just go to having no interest.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where it feels like they took a name and slapped it on a movie that's kind of nothing like the name they slapped on it. Like I'm all for like doing things that are different with franchises, because franchises get stale. Well, for one thing, Black Christmas shouldn't be a franchise to begin
That's the problem,
But-
like Black Christmas isn't a premise where you can continue off of. Even with the way the film ends, you shouldn't have a sequel to it.
It's even more weird because it's like the Hollywood remake craze of the 2000s and mid 2000s. They would go after movies with name value.
There's 2 series.
There's no name value to
There's
Black
2
Christmas.
real series that have continuations and reboots that, if you ask me, never should have existed, and Black Christmas is one of them, and the other one is Texas Chainsaw
Massacre. Yeah.
They're very, very similar films with how they tell a standalone story that just kind of exists when it comes out, and it sets a precedent, and it shouldn't be continued on. The new one, for the new Texas Chainsaw, like, I cannot say how uninteresting it is to bring back Sally. It means nothing. Like, the best thing about Texas Chainsaw and Black Christmas is that it sets up a new idea of horror. It sets up really the idea of what slashers can be, because Psycho is a very different structured film.
Yeah.
The problem with Halloween being so good and popular is that it created this entire final girl dynamic where we have to bring this back. Halloween 2 came out in 81. We bring back Laurie Strode. We bring back the final girl. And then the idea of the final girl always coming back, always coming into play. We're going to go, 40 years later now. And now we just are assumed that a final girl in a film has to come back. And now we have a new Texas Chainsaw coming back where this final girl means less than nothing. She's just a girl that was there.
Yeah,
That's
it's
it.
not like
There's no story
with
to tell.
Yeah, it's not like with Halloween when you bring back Laurie Strode, like she's faced off against Michael multiple times.
Yeah.
And or like Friday the 13th, if we were to bring back, say, Tommy Jarvis or something for a new Friday movie, it would make sense. But like, she's in one movie, she has zero connection to the character of Leatherface. She just managed to escape. Why would she go back?
It doesn't
My
make
question.
sense for this character. And
Yeah.
the way she ends up at the end of the first film, like, I'd have trouble to believe she's not in a fucking mental institution or just like,
I agree.
like she would not be functional.
No,
And
rightly so.
I don't know, like I'm all for like telling a new interesting tale, and it's not like I'm against the idea of bringing characters back and progressing their characters in different ways than you would assume. But at the same time, this is not a character that should have that story continued. I know we haven't talked about the movie yet for Black Christmas, but if they did a sequel for that 40 years later, and they brought back the original actress to play that character again and continued it on, like, what's the percentage chance of that being good? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how good could you tell that story? It's probably impossible.
Well, I just had to double check. I didn't even know if she was still alive or not.
Oh, she's
Olivia Hussey. Yeah, she's alive still. But yeah, like I don't know. We're gonna get to the ending of this movie eventually when we start talking about the movie. But with the way that the movie ends, I don't know how that would work.
Yeah.
But
I think it'd be good because if people do watch this episode and they haven't seen this movie, we will probably try to be as spoiler free as we can on it. It'll be tough, but like, this is one of those films that not a lot of people have seen,
Yeah.
And I would really like to not be the guy to fucking ruin it for somebody.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things where it's like discussing the actual specifics about this movie are really fun and interesting.
Yes.
But like I said, like we were saying before, it's like this is not a movie that I would say outside of the horror community that a ton of people have watched.
Yeah.
Or not that so much, but especially like newer like budding film fans especially probably have not seen Black Christmas. And the ending is one of the greatest endings in a horror movie in my opinion.
I'd say it's one of my favorite endings for a film, just in general. Because
I would not want to tell someone. Yeah, I would not want to tell someone explicitly what happens.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's absolutely chilling.
And you know, you brought up like budding film fans, like so people that are grasping or getting into film now probably have not seen it. But when this film came out, you know, there's a huge amount of people that were into film that really did appreciate this film.
Yeah,
I remember the main actress Olivia Hussey was talking to Steve Martin because he was saying to her like, "Oh yeah, I love that movie that you were in." She's like, "Oh, it's gonna be fucking Romeo and Juliet," and he goes, "I fucking love Black Christmas."
Wait, Steve Martin is in like Cheaper by Dozen?
Yeah, literally, fucking the
what?
Pink Panther. That's so funny.
That's crazy. Where the hell's that guy been? Jesus Christ.
You know, he's a really good comedian. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he was just like letting things go by and forming up like stand-up or something, because he does really good stand-up.
Oh, wait, no, he's in a new TV show on Hulu with Selena Gomez. That's supposed to be really good. It's supposed to be like a really good show. So, murder. It's something like a murder mystery comedy.
That's cool.
But yeah, apparently it's really funny and really good. But
yeah, I mean, like, it sucks that people nowadays aren't experiencing a film like this. You know, like you said, if you're in the horror community, if you haven't seen it yet, you probably have an interest in seeing it.
I mean, a lot of people have seen movies that this more than likely influenced.
Yeah, you've seen Halloween.
You've seen Halloween. Yeah, Halloween alone.
A film that it's influenced.
Yeah,
Halloween would not exist. You know, Texas Chainsaw has a lot to play into it, especially with like atmosphere in a film. But the structure of the film, the hunting of the predator against the prey. If this
POV
film
shots.
didn't exist, Halloween wouldn't have been made.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We always talk about how much, you know, the style of filmmaking that Halloween has influenced the slasher genre, you know, especially with like POV stuff. But Black Christmas really, not the only one obviously that pushed this, but it's another one that really leaned into that style, and it didn't nearly have the technology that Halloween had. Halloween had these, you know, the Panaglide and all these things. They literally strapped a camera to this man's shoulder and had him climb up a building with it.
It's crazy.
Like, they had to do what they had to do to get the shots, and the shots are it's so, because of how not smooth it is, you know, funnily enough, our brains kind of smooth out when we're walking and stuff. Like our vision doesn't bounce the way that a camera would, and Halloween replicates that with the Panaglide. But the fact that the camera is so unhinged because of the fact that it's just literally strapped to someone, to me that makes it more unnerving.
Yeah, there's something about Halloween running with the POV and making it feel very smooth, but like you said, it feels more like a movie and less like you're watching someone's home tapes of like a committed villainous act.
Yeah.
Which is what Texas Chainsaw did so well and what Black Christmas does so well. And the thing that I think Halloween really stands out about in the film is that we have shots where we get a good glimpse of Michael. We have shots of him in the background looking at Laurie, or just characters looking at him, which is shots you don't get in films like Black Christmas.
Yeah.
So the way that you view the killer from the main character or the final girl, that's something that really does get shown a lot in Halloween, that kind of sets that precedent for slashers. Before, when you have stuff like Texas Chainsaw, you get a glimpse of the killers at the end, obviously, when they're all on like the table going fucking mad. But It's very different than a regular slasher. Texas Chainsaw is a slasher in a very different type of setting.
Different way.
And even another film that I absolutely adore is Alice, Sweet Alice. That came out in '76. That predates Halloween, but that, like Black Christmas, is very, very intrinsic on the POV shots.
That movie's fucking nuts.
I love that movie. That's so unsettling with the atmosphere in it.
That is easily one of the favorite first time watch experiences I probably ever had. Was just being absolutely perplexed the entire time and getting that fucking reveal at the end. Holy shit! Or how it blew my mind. They actually dropped the knife and they did it like a billion times to get the stick in the railing for that one scene.
Yeah.
How that was like, that's legit. That was like a thing that they tried really hard to do, and that was so fucking cool. Talk about filmmaking, man.
I don't wince at a lot of things in movies, but when a character gets hit in the face with a brick, ooh, I wince so hard when that happens. It feels so real. But yeah, like the POV shots in Black Christmas and Alice, Sweet Alice definitely set up a lot of the shots for Halloween. Halloween changes the game in a lot of different ways with viewing the killer. And, I've said before, I love horror for 80s, but the way 70s horror is done is very masterful, and it's a very different way of filmmaking. You have a little you can work with, and you make a lot out of it. That's how you have films like Black Christmas, Alice, Sweet Alice, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw, The Exorcist.
It changed the fucking game. Like, obviously every decade has their thing that kind of just changes horror for the decade.
Yeah.
But the way that the 70s brought this like
unnerving atmosphere in almost all these films,
and the way that we leaned in the 70s, we leaned into a lot of the human aspect of horror. Like even in The Exorcist, we're still dealing with people like these are human beings we got to know, and that's
human
what brings
loss,
the real horror
which is
of it.
A catalyst for the main character.
Yeah, and all that, like the human aspect of horror, is what makes it so much more terrifying to me. And Black Christmas exemplifies that perfectly, because the killer is a human being, and he is deranged.
He is pretty much the antithesis of Halloween, where the more you're experiencing Michael Myers, the less human he becomes. But the more you follow Black Christmas, you just realize this could be any fucking person down the street.
And that's what makes it even scarier.
Yeah.
The thing about Halloween is that the event itself is one of those things where you're like, oh, that could happen on my street. Someone could throw a mask on and stab someone. But here it's an unknown person. You never see who it really is. They could be hiding in your closet. They could be hiding in the bushes outside your house waiting for you, and you'll never see them coming. That is the most horrifying part about Billy. Other than the phone, I'll say the phone calls are pretty freaking unnerving. They're really freaking unnerving. Yeah, I remember I watched this at like pitch black midnight around Christmas. It might have been Christmas Eve, honestly. And I was just sitting there, and the first call came up, and I instantly had a chill go down my spine. And it's not just the dialogue in the calls or the way that it's delivered, but also the score behind it is so, it's not a traditional score the way we think about it, the way that movies, I'd say, score with like movements and notes and stuff. It's very, very visceral. These visceral sounds that are not, it's not that it's not music, but it's more so it's reflecting auditorily like what's going on the screen in a much more, it doesn't feel as cinematic as like a score like Halloween's or something.
I think nowadays, the score for horror movies is so like, what's a good word? It's like everyone has a fair assumption of what it's going to be like, or we have this idea of it going to be like boom, 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 with a big shrieking sound to cut in
like
with
a stinger
to cut in with like a fucking jump scare. And we have this fictitious idea of everything it's going to be like, because horror since the 2000s have been so watered down, just recycled bullshit. But when you have scores back in the days, like, they're masterfully made for these films. Like, you can't just put in a score for like Friday the 13th in Halloween and it works. You can't take the score from Black Christmas and put it in Alice, Sweet Alice and it works. These film scores are made specifically for this film versus like hey, I made a film score for a sequel for I Know What You Did Last fucking summer. Yeah, we could put this in another film and it would make no difference.
Yeah. I think funnily enough, because we were talking about Scream not that long ago, and we were discussing like I brought the score, like I really like the score for Scream, but like some of the music from Scream is in Halloween H2O.
Yeah.
And you don't even think about it.
No, the score is so it's so like unnecessary. They don't care. It's not a vital part to the film.
Yeah, it's not like,
you know, like I do love that movie, but that's such a big fault for a horror film for the score to not be intrinsic to the story.
It's not memorable.
No.
Outside of the way that John Ottman's new version of the theme is noticeable, because it's like unlike the entire series. It's pretty much the only part of music in the entire movie that I remember.
I could not name a single tune from Resurrection.
No. I think that the music in this is instantly memorable just because I haven't seen many movies think about their score the way that they thought about this score.
Yeah.
Like it's so, again, the word is unnerving, and it's a word that we're probably going to use a lot, but it's true. Like it is so off-putting in a good way, because it puts you in a situation where you feel very, set in a position of unease for the majority of the runtime. Because the kind of funny thing is like this movie is, not only is it very, very uncomfortable to watch sometimes and very scary, but also it's funny.
I was gonna say, like, there's a lot of time where you get downtime or like a nice breath of air to like make things easy to digest. It's not just a constant hit
Relentless.
of like horror, scared, fucking terrified, unnerved. There's a lot of levity between scenes, especially with certain characters, like Margot Kidder's character especially.
Oh yeah. But the nice thing is that it's one of those things where it's another one of those the 70s movies where it aims to jar you, because it's like you're in a scene where it's funny. Like even like the first scene, not the very first scene, but like when Margot Kidder's talking on the phone, like even between the discussions between like her and Billy when she's trash talking him, like that shit's funny. And you'll get scenes like that. You'll get like a very tense scene, like the first kill of the movie. But then, like, not too long after that, you're gonna get the scene where she goes to the police station and tells the guy about the new exchange, and that shit's really funny. Or when she's talking to the girl's dad about how turtles fuck for like 24 hours or whatever. You get these kinds of moments in between, but like immediately you'll get hit with something right after it that's not funny. And again, we always talk about online and in movies and stuff about how jarring tonal shifts can be a bad thing. But for some reason, again, like the 70s were wild, because like they just had this way of doing these tonal shifts that should not work, but do. And this is a very, very good example of a movie that understands how to really shock the audience out of a sense of comfortability.
I think it really benefits from having a balance in comedy, because if you have something like this just consistently with its tone drive through the entire runtime of the film, it could kind of leave you walking out of a theater saying, I can understand that was really good, but like I didn't enjoy watching that. Versus the way it is now, it's like I enjoy watching this movie. It's a fantastic movie. I'd recommend it to everybody. But nowadays is very different, because you don't have a balance of comedy very well in films anymore. I feel like I'm just kind of shitting on newer films, but it's just like the balance is different now. When you have comedy, it's a lot less of levity, but more like, hey, it's been 5 minutes, we need to throw in a joke to make it easier. Yeah. But with films like this, you get through 20 minutes of suspense and terror, and then you get one off-put comment like, oh, that's kind of funny, I feel a little bit better. All right, back to business.
Yeah. It's like, as much as we're going to keep it's just the easiest target. But we talk about the Halloween franchise, and we talk about the new Halloween movies, especially. I really like both of them a lot. I loved the 2018 movie, but one of the things about the 2018 movie, and it's something that does not as much in Kills, because I feel like Kills isn't nearly as funny as
No, I don't
or
think
trying to be nearly as funny. But the first one does definitely have these moments where you're like, they're kind of just like, it's like David Gordon Green and I don't know, Danny McBride are like,
Yeah.
well, we're funny, so like we got to throw some jokes in here too, which is fine. It's just, it does feel like sometimes the horror gets stopped to have a funny moment.
I think the biggest problem is that they're using characters to fulfill the humor a lot of the time. And for the first film, it's the dad character, which I don't think anybody liked.
Or Julian.
Yeah,
but Julian is cool.
But we're just like not
Julian.
Following these characters and being like, oh yeah, this humor is really well done. With Kills, there's not as much humor, but when there is humor, it's usually Big John or Little John.
And it's funny.
And most of the audiences love those characters, so it's easier to digest being like, well, if I like the character, I'm more likely to like these jokes versus some fucking 45-year-old bald dude saying, there's peanut butter on my penis.
My dick, yeah.
People aren't going to be like, yo, nice.
Funnily enough, I think that line was removed from the novelization. I was listening to it on Audible. When I got to that scene, I don't think it's in the book.
It's so unnecessary. I mean,
it's bad. It's just bad.
I don't even think you needed to break tension in that scene too. It just exists.
There's no tension.
Either. You know what
there's
I mean?
no tension.
Just, they're at a kitchen.
Yeah, it reminds me of the scene in we're way off topic, but the scene in Rob Zombie's Halloween where they have the whole like she's fingering the bagel.
Oh, I hate that scene.
Their mom, like, it reminds me of something like that, although that's much more vulgar and stupid. But it's one of those things where it's just like there's no tension going on here. We're just kind of throwing a joke in here for no reason.
Yeah, I think
we're being
comedy
crass.
needs to exist in horror as a counterbalance or to relieve tension. It shouldn't just exist unless you have like kind of like a horror comedy like Evil Dead.
Oh yeah.
If it's a very differently structured film, sure, but
or like Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah.
Which I watched this year. Like that's again, it's Sam Raimi. Basically, if it's not Sam Raimi, just don't do horror comedy. Okay. Let's move on.
I don't know.
Fright Night's really good.
That's the first thing I think of is anything that Holland has done usually kind of like a horror comedy. Like even Child's Play has a lot of comedy.
Or Joe Dante. I mean, outside of The Howling.
Yeah, I mean Joe Dante. It depends on if you describe his films as horror films to some people. Like, do you describe Gremlins as a horror film?
I would say it is a horror movie. It's one of those things where it's like a.
I don't think it's intended to be a horror movie. I think it takes a lot of horror ideas, but like I don't think there's many scenes where like, am I worried that Billy is going to be killed by Stripe? Probably not.
No, but I just also think that like we're.
The mom scene, I mean, like the scene where the mom is in the kitchen is framed like a horror thing.
You watched Gremlins when you were younger, than me, because I watched it as an adult for the first time. But I view it as basically it's horror targeted at children.
Yeah.
So I don't find it scary, but I can definitely see how a child would. It's like Goosebumps or something, or like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the movie.
See, but with those. It's different because those are structured as horror throughout the entirety. I don't think Gremlins is structured entirely as horror. And we don't need to... I mean, it's another Christmas movie.
It's a Christmas movie.
Not super off topic, I guess, but like...
Yeah. But we were talking about Black Christmas, which is intrinsically not a horror movie. Not a children's movie. So.
No.
So, yeah. I mean...
It's a different topic.
It is definitely a different topic. But I will say that the fact that Gremlins is an Amblin production definitely makes it feel less scary.
Yes.
It's like Poltergeist is a horror movie.
Yeah.
But it's very much a fun horror movie. It's not the same as something like this.
Well, it's like Jaws is a horror film, but it's also primarily like an adventure film.
Yeah.
The sense of wonder in the movie, even though you're not leaving really one location, you're always on the ocean for the most part.
And that's kind of how I feel about Gremlins. It's like it's definitely supposed to be a horror movie, but it definitely leads into its adventure aspects a lot.
I usually categorize it as like an adventure comedy, because there's so much humor thrown in there that
or something like maybe Monster Squad, although Monster Squad is more, I guess, crass.
I would primarily say that's an adventure film, but I would say adventure horror,
it's horror
because
flavored.
there's so much structure to be horrifying to
A degree.
set up for the scenes. Like,
Yeah.
maybe we don't think the mummy's gonna kill anybody, but the way that the scene is structured is supposed to be intended for a horror audience.
Yeah. But yeah, that's not. It's not what we're here to discuss. But very important. Well, we kind it's kind of like capping off it. We start like the last episode we kind of briefly touched on Gremlins and how, because we were talking about the movies we were gonna do,
Yeah.
and we talked about whether or not we would have done Gremlins, and we both kind of discussed that anyways. But you know,
I love Gremlins, but if you're gonna do a film for Christmas, it should be Black Christmas.
Yeah, I can think of other Christmas horror movies that I would do before Gremlins.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's so weird to think how this has 2 remakes, because it isn't a wide sought after film for people to watch. It's just very weird. It shows how respected it is in the community, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with the newest remake being by Blumhouse, you know, Blumhouse obviously respects horror to an nth degree.
Yeah.
But
they also respect their filmmakers to a degree too. So
yes.
they didn't demand a movie that was like this movie. They allowed the director to make their movie,
which is great.
And that's great. And if people enjoy the new Black Christmas, and I can't talk about whether or not it's good or bad.
Yeah,
but if people enjoy it, that's great.
I think for people to always want people to kind of meddle in business and say, hey, we need things to kind of line up a certain way, shut the fuck up. It's always better to have divisive things that are either really good or really bad. I'd rather take things that are either 9 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 than everything consistently a 6 out of 10. That makes movies really boring.
I mean, like we were talking about it right before the episode, but like as the time of recording this, Matrix Resurrections just came out, and it's one of those things where it's just like they did their movie, they did their version of what they wanted to do, and whether you like it or not, take it or leave it. But
it's why people like talking about film though. You can the thing about Black Christmas is that like you could either love it or hate it. I don't think anyone's gonna fall middle of the road on Black Christmas either.
I'll say this: I've never met someone who hates this movie.
100%. I haven't either. But
I'm sure they exist.
Yeah, I can't see someone being like it's mid. I'd be like, oh, it's mid. You know what I mean? Like
I might scream.
If you have somebody that's talking about film with you, if you're having a discussion with another person, you do not want to talk about a film that's okay. You want to talk about a film that's either really good or really bad, or just has a division to it that can increase dialogue between two people. You know, whenever we talk about like the Disney Plus shows, I just don't care because I just like they're so middle of the road. It's like, to me, the dialogue is just like this could happen. It's more about theorizing what could happen versus like this is how the show is making me feel. Versus,
well, that's how they structure those shows. It's just like, well, what's going to happen next? Discuss it, and then we're going to subvert your expectations by being worse.
That's why it's such bad fucking television. Because like, I'm not sitting here talking about how much I like this show. I'm talking about something that doesn't fucking exist. Like,
the only one of these shows I outright like straight up love is Hawkeye. The rest of them I could take or leave, honestly. So
I'd rather talk about things that I think are either really amazing to me or just really lackluster, because it's a discussion to have. Because you're gonna talk to somebody that does love it or that does hate those things that you have divisive opinions on, versus like, hey, I don't want to talk about something that is fine, because at the end of the day, you're just gonna sit there being like, did you like that? Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, nice conversation.
Yeah, it's like trying to find like a really good explanation. Fucking, I don't know, Snake Eyes from this year. I mean, you didn't watch it, but like, it's one of those things where it's just like it is definitively fucking mid. Like, it exists. It should be better than it is.
Just to bring it to horror, there's like what fucking 80 horror films just from like the 80s. It's in general that just fucking are mid. They're just fine.
Yeah.
It's always cool to get the 80s aesthetic for a film you haven't seen before, but like you watch and say, this means nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Like, some things are bad, some things are good, and that it exists. It's how it was for like Night of the Demons.
Oh my god.
It's very mid.
I wouldn't even call that mid.
There's good stuff in it, but there's also bad stuff in it.
There's good stuff. There's good like makeup effects and stuff, but like I think that it's so uninteresting.
But that's comparative. I feel like it's uninteresting comparative to other stuff you can get in that time period of that genre. Where it's like,
I just think that,
why would I watch this when I could watch Evil Dead?
I think the setup promises something it just doesn't deliver. Like, especially like the way that the style that it comes in with, you know, the fucking opening credits are so good. You know, it's got all this like real cool style and ambiance to it, and then you get the movie and like there's nothing happening that is worth a damn.
I think it hurts from the fact that the characters are so stereotypical that it's like this is almost intentional with how stereotypical they are. You'd think that the plot must be ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, if these characters are at like a fucking 11 out of 10 for personality, the story has to be like that. But when the story's like a 5 out of 10, you're like, this is not lining up.
Yeah, and the dialogue's all inane bullshit. And it's ridiculous. But that's thankfully something that this movie does not suffer from.
Yeah, because films from the 70s for horror are structured very, very differently. Like we've said before.
This is one I would definitely classify.
Attention to detail.
Yeah, this is definitely one that I would classify as a slow burn.
Yeah.
Not that it's a slow-paced movie, but it doesn't regale you with these just gigantic sequences. Or, you know, like these really elaborate, like the most elaborate sequence in the entire movie, I'd probably say, is the unicorn kill.
Yeah.
Just because it's happening on multiple different levels. There's the visuals are on point. That it's one of the most beautifully crafted kill sequences I've ever seen in an a North American slasher movie.
Canada
especially
did it, didn't they?
It's Canada. It's Canadian. But it is one of the most beautifully crafted sequences in a horror film for me. Like the way that it's lit, the way that it's filmed, the contrasting, the killing against the caroling outside, and these big blue these big like colored blown out lights that are just absolutely gorgeous. Like it's such an incredible looking scene. It's probably the most elaborate scene in the movie.
Yeah, I'd say so.
It's not one of those movies where it's like wall to wall people dying. Like not that many people die in this movie.
It's a small scale. I think it's got to be around
like 3, 4, if even. Yeah. Well,
I have to list off the names to figure it out. I don't want to.
Yeah, we can't spoil. Yeah, we can't spoil it. I'm just trying to think. There's a couple of kills I distinctly remember saying like, "Yep, that's a death." But
I can think of at least 4 right now. So I'm pretty sure there's at least 5 to 6.
Yeah, it's not a very kill-focused movie, and the way that they are paced out is really cool.
It helps that you have a really well-acted lead that you're following through everything.
Olivia Hussey is so fucking good in this. Like she is so damn good. And we were talking about Halloween 6's character, and we brought up Black Christmas for a reason. You know, obviously this is a better character, but you know, it is one of those things where it's a not conventional slasher final girl. I mean, obviously this is before we had the slasher playbook, but you know, she's a college student. She's very career focused. She's, you know, working really hard to become an independent person, and she's, well, I don't know how much I really want to say, but she has a very, very defining aspect to her character that causes drama between her and her boyfriend, which puts him in as a possible suspect.
I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the thing you're talking about is abortion, and I'm not going to describe the events that go into with the film, but like to talk about that topic in a film in the 1970s is very, very unheard of. It's
very, very. It's one of those things where I don't see. I feel like someone could come out and point out where I'm wrong, but the fact that this is a Canadian movie makes it feel like that kind of conversation is a bit easier.
Maybe.
I'm not saying that because I don't know shit about the way that Canada viewed abortion in the 70s, but I feel like American movies would not do that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't name one in the same time.
At least I don't know if they would side. I don't know if they would side with the woman.
nowadays, yeah. I mean, if you hear people in public, conservatives are very vocal about their takes on abortion, but
Yeah.
Hollywood's still very left. I feel like nowadays, sure. In that time period, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know if this is something that they would so openly give to the character you're following. Sure, someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like something, again, like back in the days, this was a boundary pushing kind of idea to have your main character, your final girl, be dealing with this kind of an issue.
Oh, 100%.
And it's awesome.
If it came out today, it'd still be polarizing.
Yeah, and I think that her boyfriend, played by I don't know how to pronounce his name, Keir Dullea, I think he's actually one of the main characters in 2001: A Space Odyssey. But he's really good in this. He's kind of got a specific kind of character to play.
Yeah.
And his character exists for a certain purpose for the narrative, but I think he's really good. And man, it is just wild watching a movie from this era that deals with these issues.
Yeah.
Is it something that's like it's the main focal point of the movie? No. But it's something that definitely plays strongly into our perception of what's going on.
In the way, like, everyone gets mad about talking about politics in films nowadays. You always talk about politics in films. Every film that comes out is talking about politics in one way or the other. And to hear this talked about in 1974 is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, like, I know when I watched it for the first time, and I was watching the scene transpire, I'm like, this is incredible. This came out. Like, I'd feel like, I'm surprised censors didn't say, you have to cut this.
Yeah.
Because technically, I mean, you probably could and make it function decently, but it helps so much of the plot to make this character so much more relatable, likable, and realistic.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like, again, like, I don't want to suck the dick of the 60s that much, of the 70s that much, but like that's just kind of the thing with the 70s, not just with the way that they present horror itself, but just the way that they presented characters was boundary pushing.
Absolutely. I mean, the way that we've got a very realistic approach of the 70s really sets up this overacting and stereotypical approach that we get for characters in the 80s. And
yeah.
I love, favorite movie of all time, but Marty McFly is like a stereotypical cool guy who'll do anything in the 80s, and that's why he works, But these characters exist in the 80s because of how realistic and grounded we want characters from the 70s to feel.
I would also wager it also has a lot to do with the fact that in the 80s we were also kind of responding to post-Vietnam, how very dark things got, and it feels like sometimes in the
also
80s we got very
too.
Yes,
with Reagan being in there and having him in office, it changed a lot of how people are perceiving just a general realisticness for just the attitudes going on.
I think the 80s is the perfect example for when we talk about escapism in film.
Yeah.
Not to say that there weren't realistic or darker films in the 80s at all, but a lot of the big pop culture films are very, very escapist.
Yeah.
And I think that's for quite a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we also have the 90s, which is supposed to be hitting on realistic portrayals, but it's very much
meta and slick and smart.
Referential. And it's funny, I mean, like, the 90s is trying to do what the 70s did, just worse.
Yeah.
In the 2000s said, we're just going to make everything bad. Everything's going to look like fucking mud thrown on a fucking piece of paper. Just everything is going to not be slick. It's just going to be so grungy and gross.
Yep. These movies we're going to remake, we're going to look at the movies, how like wonderfully they're shot or how they pioneered certain cinematic techniques, and let's just not do any of that.
At least nowadays we have functional films again.
Yeah.
It only took 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it all goes back to Black Christmas. We wouldn't really have slashers the way we do, if it wasn't for that film.
Movies like this is a very crucial part. Combine this with things like Psycho, Peeping Tom, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Alice, Sweet Alice.
Yep.
They had these these very, very transgressive movies that, kind of reminded people that humans are some of the scariest creatures that you can possibly put in a movie. And Billy is one of those, man.
Absolutely. It's tough to believe that what spawned from this realistic portrayal of human horror created things like Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. But
Yeah.
the genre just popped off after Halloween, and they took the supernatural elements and ran with it.
It's funny enough though, because like even those two movies are very rooted in human issues,
Yeah.
Or human people who their reasonings for being a killer, or not reasonings for being a killer, but their origin stories, or in the case of Freddy was a bad word to use, but an accomplished murderer before he became a dream demon. And
Yeah, he's already a child killer.
it's one of those things where it's like he is the literal, he is the continuing trauma that is wreaked on the people that he hurt.
In the original Friday the 13th, we're going by with Pamela, talking about losing her deformed son, and how it's like the only thing she had left to attach her to humanity just drove her off the deep end.
Yeah,
And
so
now
it's like,
she's seeking
again,
revenge.
yeah, so even in these movies that become ridiculous in the 80s, we're still dealing with these human issues.
Yeah.
And I feel like that gets lost in the shuffle when we're talking about blood, guts, gore, tits, and all this stuff.
Yeah. Slashers always started off as a very smart genre, and as the decades go on and on and on, things definitely dwindle down and become more of a faceless, just amalgamation death trap of the genre it is now. All the referential shit we're talking about in the 90s feels so insufferable if you're paying attention to the actual class that it was brought upon in the early and late 70s.
Yeah.
You can joke about how many big-breasted blonde bimbos die in these films all you want, but it doesn't change the fact when the genre started off, like, these are fucking masterclass films that really changed the genre. And
yes,
you can talk and be meta and referential and say like, oh, you're just gonna say this and that, and you're gonna try to kill me. They're not all like that. Dwindling it down into being just some trash heap is pretty disrespectful.
that's one of those things. Is like, obviously, like, slashers are a dirty franchise to people.
Yes.
They still are, even in movies like obviously, like, the new Halloween was positively rated. We've had other slasher movies that have been well received, but when you want to like talk to someone about a slasher, the first thing they think of is like one of a cheesy 80s slasher movie.
Yeah.
But if you showed them Alice Sweet Alice, for one thing, they would probably tell you it's not a slasher movie because they like it.
Yeah.
Because it's an elevated slasher apparently. But we're this is nothing like what people's perception of a slasher is. It has similar elements. There's a killer. He kills people.
It's the same way I look at it. It sounds weird, but I've always looked at the genres very similar. But the very niche of superhero films is very similar to how you look at horror, because we're so used to the same old shit being thrown out every now and then. When a good superhero film comes out, we're like, wow, this is different.
Yeah.
Where we're so used to it being like, oh, superhero films are all the same shit, disregarding the fact that shit like fucking Superman 78 exists for some reason, or Spider-Man from Raimi exists, or
the Burton Batman movies.
Exactly, like that these films aren't masterclass films that really changed the genre of their decades.
Yes.
And
that are artfully made films, artfully made blockbusters.
Yeah. And we're so used to it now that when someone's like, oh, there's no films out nowadays, there's no comic film that even comes close to Zack Snyder's Justice League, it's like, dude, that's a great movie and all, but like, you're fucking stupid. Like, to say that's the only good comic book film to exist is ridiculous to an extent that people like are being so ignorant. It's the same way when people say there's no horror film as good as Get Out, or Us is the best horror film ever made. Like, dude, these are great movies, but like,
yeah, they're amazing movies.
Shut up. Like, can we not shit on an entire genre to just elevate your one movie? Yeah. Why does everything else have to be bad for yours to be good?
Well, I've seen a recent resurgence of people on Twitter talking about horror and how like the Academy's tweeting out these movies and like, oh, this movie came out this fucking day, years ago, And
I saw that post. I really liked that.
It's like, again, like you horror films get dumped on.
It was Scream,
continuously.
particularly.
Scream.
Your post you're talking about.
Yeah,
the Academy's saying, "Oh, Scream's been out for 25 years. Let's celebrate it." You know?
Yeah, and it's just like you're celebrating it now, but you completely ignore Hereditary, or something else that's been like incredible that's come out in the past couple of years. You'll ignore all these movies because they're horror movies. You don't care about horror at all. You don't respect horror unless it's convenient. Like I think Get Out's great, and I think Us is great, but they get nominated for reasons.
Yeah, and it's not to say those reasons aren't certified or agreeable.
Not at all.
The Academy picks and chooses the same way that you'll never have another animated feature nominated for Best Film ever again.
Yeah,
ever again. Because they made a separate category to give the fucking kid who's the fucking here's your participation award. Because we don't look at them as real films in the Academy's eyes anymore.
The thing is that taking Get Out or whatever out of the equation, no matter what, I don't think a horror movie, no matter which one gets nominated, is going to win Best Picture.
No. Again.
Not for a very long time.
What's the last one that... There's definitely been one that's won it, hasn't there? Exorcist was nominated.
There's been ones that have won in the past, but I don't think a horror film has won Best Picture in decades.
I think the last one I can name off the top of my head, like this was nominated and it might have won, is Exorcist.
I'm sure Shining was nominated.
Ooh, that's good. Actually, I don't think Exorcist won, because what is it? Would that be the year prior to Star Wars being nominated? Because I know the year Star Wars was nominated, Annie Hall won.
The Shining came out in 1980.
I'm talking about Exorcist, though. That's 76, isn't it?
76 or 7.
Yeah.
No, 73.
That's wild.
I just saw.
I think I've done that. I've gotten that wrong every time I've brought up the date.
76. See, the last one that they say won Best Picture.
If it's Silence of the Lambs, I'll fucking kill myself.
It's Silence. That's the last one they say won Best Picture.
It's not fucking a horror movie. It's not.
But again, like that's the one.
I'll kill myself. I'll fucking do it. That's so stupid.
Only 6 horror films have ever been nominated for Best Picture.
And one of those counted is Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, The Exorcist is one of them. Jaws is another one.
Silence,
of the Lambs,
Sixth Sense,
and Black Swan.
and Get Out. Those are so like we're fucking stretching the category.
And also to roll back to Silence of the Lambs, very deserved. Fucking incredible movie.
It's so stretching the category, being like, well, this kind of fits, right? Like Black Swan.
Well, I haven't seen Black Swan. I can't talk about Black Swan. So, but Aronofsky has directed horror films, so I don't know if it's a horror film or not. But that right there tells you how much the Academy cares about horror films. 6.
I think Get Out deserves it for its commentary. Don't get me wrong.
Get Out is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong. Get Out is one of the best debuts I've ever seen. It is incredible. I'm not trying to at all discount that movie. Fucking awesome film. But it is one of those things where it's just like, you're not going to get the Jordan Peele's our only hope.
I'll say this much. Since Us didn't get nominated, I guarantee you he doesn't get nominated again. I think we're underestimating how fucking racist Hollywood is. Like, I feel like it got nominated as like oh man, you did a good job. Thanks, buddy. And like, I think Us is possibly a better made film.
Get Out won Best Original Screenplay, and I think it deserved that.
Yeah. I
For
can't
sure.
see them treating it nicely after that. I think that's like a nice courteous, like, hey, you did good.
Yeah, we'll see when it comes to Nope, which comes out next year.
Yeah.
But
You listed those films though. There's no reason I can't see why Black Christmas of all films couldn't be nominated for Best Picture. Like, for that 74, you know, like, if Exorcist is on there, I think Black Christmas is the same level of competence for filmmaking and storytelling as Exorcist.
I think that recently, the one that has made me the most upset is Hereditary not being nominated.
I haven't seen it personally, so I can't speak about it. I've
You know,
seen
like-
Midsummer, which I know is by the same team, and I wasn't fond of it, but I've heard many of people feel the same way as I do on that, and they love Hereditary.
Hereditary is a much tighter movie than Midsummer, from what I understand, because I haven't seen Midsummer yet. But it's a much tighter movie. But the fact that didn't get nominated for Best Picture, Director, and Toni Collette did not get a nomination for Best Actress, fucking to this day peeves the hell out of me, because it's incredible, and she is too good. She's way too good, and it's one of those things where, again, it feels like, because she got other awards that year, and Hereditary got other attention from other people, and it just feels like, again, they're just like, well, they just pat horror on the head and say, well, maybe next time.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating.
It's really
like this
disrespectful too.
Horror created cinema.
100%.
Like, and I'm not saying that to be pretentious or rude.
No,
like,
it did.
some of the first films ever made in the medium are horror movies.
If James Whale didn't exist and make the films he did in the 30s, filmmaking would not be the way it is now. It wouldn't have the same level of interest. It would not have picked up to when it did. Frankenstein, Invisible
Going even
Man.
further back, though, like, even go further back, go back to Silent Era, go back to movies like Nosferatu.
Believe me, I agree. I'm just saying, like, when the sound era kicked off, the films that are making money during the Great Depression are fucking horror films.
Yeah,
They're the films that
Universal
people are
horror.
going to see.
Universal horror absolutely
100%.
just blew. Those are, like, obviously blockbusters weren't back then. That would be what would be their equivalent for blockbusters.
Yes,
would be
absolutely.
things like that. You know, these are, like, this genre is very important to the medium, and it just feels like constantly the Academy's just stuck in this mindset of, well, horror is just a lesser genre.
Well, the reason in the 70s, to bring it all back, the way Black Christmas functionally works so well with it being the human horror shows why we weren't talking about this in prior decades. The way the sound era kicks off, we're in the Great Depression. We don't want to deal with human horror. That's not something we got enough of that going around. I can't eat tonight. So we're going to talk about supernatural horror. We're going to talk about ghosts, goblins, mummies, vampires, monsters.
Werewolves.
Exactly. And then, you know, with the 40s, we're talking about those same type of monsters, introducing more, having the monsters meet up. Big terror, bye-bye, you're scared. In the 50s, we're talking atomic age. You know, we've had things like the nuclear bomb hit now, and we're worried about what else could happen from shit like this. You have things like Godzilla come out. You have things like Creature from the Black Lagoon. You have a lot of alien Space Invaders films. And all these things about, like, what's on the outside that you are worried about coming in.
Yeah.
And then when Psycho hits, we're not talking about other people, other things, other instances. We're talking about you as a person. You yourself can be just as terrifying. And then you realize what's more terrifying than humanity. And then the 70s says, you know what? You're right. We're going to really show you how fucking terrifying humanity can be, really. And then things like Black Christmas exists. And this film really shows you the underbelly of what a human being could be. And Texas Chainsaw does that too, but these are very deranged, radical people that it's a soul family in Texas. Running into that might be a little bit tough, but one home intruder, that could happen anywhere.
Easy.
It happens everywhere. You could know somebody that you grew up with saying, yeah, they got broken into and some unspeakable shit happened.
Yeah, like I wouldn't call this I wouldn't call this, like, literally, it's just like a straight up horror movie, but like something like Straw Dogs, you know, it brings that kind of a very tangibility to assailants and makes it like, you know, one wrong move, man, and you could get, you know, your house could be invaded, you could be attacked, you could be forced to do. Maybe the real horror about Straw Dogs is realizing what you are willing to do to protect the people that you love or protect your home. And that's horrifying in its own right sometimes, but it's really bringing it back to that very realistic idea of what is scary to humans.
I think,
and honestly, that's just violence.
Yeah, I think when you have films, especially like in the 2000s, where you have a lot more home invader type films come out, you realize just how terrifying somebody being in your home can really be. Yeah. What I feel like they really lose a luster on is they lose a lot of the realistic aspects to these things in those films.
Yeah.
But the thing about Black Christmas is it always tries to stay grounded.
Yeah, it's always, it's always about people that you could conceivably meet on the street
with conceivably real issues.
Exactly. And the killer is someone, some people who die, they never see who kills them.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying. In your final moments, you have no idea who killed you. Like, imagine that. That's chilling. And we haven't talked about it yet, but the ending of the movie is just as chilling as that idea.
Yeah. Like we said, we're gonna try to, for anybody who haven't seen the film and you want to get into it, it's been a very jumbled, mismatched episode. We've gone back and forth, but I think that's what Black Christmas does, is because it opens the gateway to say we've gone so far in horror, we've come from so far, and we've gone through every spectrum of different things, and Black Christmas just kind of sits in the middle saying, like, yeah, we've talked about these mummies, we've talked about these monsters, we can go back into these new different versions of characters in a modern remake setting, or we can just go back to humanity and saying, like, what's more terrifying than a neighbor that you don't know what they can do?
Yeah, I agree.
And we won't talk about the end, but I promise
we won't talk about specifics, but let me tell you what, it's gonna make you want to just sit there and not want to move.
I promise you, you are not gonna end that film with a expressionless face. Something is going to happen and you're going to say, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I agree. You're correct. I think it is probably one of the greatest movie endings ever.
I can't name many films that I've watched for the first time and said, that's just going to sit with me for the rest of my life. And
yeah.
This is one of them, as so is Alice Sweet Alice. Those are first time watches where I feel like I won't forget that ending. And it's always going to sit there and say, this is unsettling. And nothing beats that atmosphere from the 70s. And you'll never get it again. And no. I love the fact I've experienced Black Christmas. I wish I could experience a film like this again. That's how good of a movie it is. You said, man, I'll watch it again. I'll never get the same feeling, but it's just as terrifying on rewatch.
I'll tell you what, though. I mean, every time I watch Black Christmas, I still have this pit in my stomach at the end of the movie.
Yes.
That never goes away. Is it as like
poignant?
The first time I watched it, like I felt this chill run over my body and I just could not move. That's how like just absolutely stunned I was. Do I get that anymore? No, but it's still sitting there. You're just like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That is horrifying. And I will never forget that. I will never not appreciate that exact experience. And like my experience with this movie was a bit unique for me because I watched this first and then immediately watched the remake.
Oh, following
really? Which to be completely honest, did not help the remake.
Yeah.
So maybe I should rewatch the remake without doing that, because no matter what, following up after Black Christmas, you're gonna look worse. But the ending of this movie put me in a state where it's just like pure. I don't want to get too pretentious, but like it is kind of, for me, it was a euphoric experience as far as just like a movie that is not afraid to end the way this movie ends.
I agree.
And when you look at this movie and you realize the other Christmas classic that this man directed, it is so weird how polar opposite these movies are.
Yeah, Christmas Story.
Yeah, it's the same guy who directed A Christmas Story. That's fucking wild. Also, A Christmas Story sucks, and I'll stand by that every fucking day of the week.
I haven't seen it fully in so many years. I can't really have an opinion on it. I do
not
care.
To be fair, my uncle used to there's a channel on that they just play this movie the entire day on repeat. And during Christmas dinner, we would throw that on, and I'd have to watch that movie over and over again. So there's no possible way in my life I'm ever gonna like that movie.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, though, the bully from Christmas Story follows me on Twitter, and I don't know why.
Cringe.
It's weird. I got a message one day. It says Zach Ward follows you. I'm like, who the fuck is Zach Ward? And I clicked on it. His profile picture was him from A Christmas Story. I'm like, what the fuck? Why is it? Why? Okay. Probably shouldn't talk about how much I don't like A Christmas Story on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there really is to say about Black Christmas.
I think we've said more than enough.
The only thing I can stress is the unicorn kill is just like one of my favorite kill scenes in
I just think the opening kill is one of the best kills I've ever seen in a horror film.
It's so unnerving.
It's so out of nowhere too.
Oh my god, it's so uncomfortable. And like they cut back to it's a running but like a running shot in the movie is the result of that kill. It's one of the most iconic images from the movie.
Yeah.
Like it used to be on the DVD case all the time. You know, it's a very, very iconic shot, and it comes back over and over again. It looks so gnarly, and oh god, it's one of the ways. If think about ways to die, it is probably one of the most excruciating thoughts in my head. Dying like that, scared, like oh god.
I think it's a little nonsensical to say, but if you had to give a rating for the film, what would you give it?
I'm gonna give it a 10. Obviously,
yeah,
I think this is. It is one of the best horror movies ever made. I would probably put it's definitely probably in my top 25 favorite movies ever made. I think this movie absolutely is just.
I think it's in my top 25 as well.
It's just immaculate. It's just one of those movies where like I can't think of a single thing I can point to and say I don't like this.
I agree. I can't see any flaws in it.
Like even in Halloween, like I adore Halloween. I
There's
think it's a masterpiece too. There's stuff I can point to and say like if you want to tell me you don't like that, I get that. It's fine. I can't think of something in this movie that I don't like, and I can't think of a conversation I've ever had with somebody where we've watched this movie where we've ever said something we haven't liked about the movie.
Yeah,
it's just one of those movies, man. And it's like again, it's really sad because it feels like not enough people really watch this movie every year. Like it feels really weird to say like it feels like I'm sounding like a hipster saying like people don't appreciate this movie that I really love. More people should watch this. And cool because I like this movie, but like it feels like this is a movie that should be much bigger than it really is.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say definitely for our age range, you know, people have no problem being like mid-20s and putting on Back to the Future or like The Exorcist, but that should be the same for something like Black Christmas.
Yeah.
I think it should be a regular type thing to explore older films and realize, man, I'm missing out on this.
I see more people that I know who aren't like huge horror fans talk about Silent Night, Deadly Night than Black Christmas.
That's weird.
And I like Silent Night, Deadly Night. I think it's a blast. But
it's so weird.
It is unequivocally a worse movie. And especially, to be fair, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 is a meme online.
Yeah.
Even outside of the horror community. So, you know, the Garbage Day meme was a huge meme. So that's not surprising. But it's like Black Christmas is such a good film that it's really disappointing that most people, like, I don't hear it talked about as prevalently from people who don't, you know, do this all the time. You know, like we watch horror films all the time, or movies in general. We watch a lot of movies and talk about them all the time, but I feel like this is one of those movies that should be a seminal film that is talked about in the same light as a movie like Halloween or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's really sad that it's not, and I think that eventually, I hope that one day it does become that kind of a movie.
Yeah. I was gonna go on and say like, oh, if you had any final words, but I think that's kind of the best way to end that off is to say like, this should be a film that everyone watches. It should be a household name for horror, especially. There's no reason someone can talk about Texas Chainsaw and not follow it up with talking about Black Christmas, a film that came out the same year and, you know, changed the genre in a very similar way. And I love them both for very different reasons. I don't know which I'd say I prefer, but, you know, they should be on equal playing fields. And I think it sucks that they're not. This is a film that should not be unnoticed by a variety of people that just blissfully are ignorant to it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'd say that pretty much wraps up the episode. I mean,
I agree.
Do you want to talk about the elephant in the room?
Yeah. So this is gonna be our final episode of the podcast. we decided to end it here on the on a incredible movie.
Yeah. I think that also describes why we've been so talk about this, talk about that, go through a lot of things.
Yeah, because it's like this is the last time we're going to talk about it. It's a bit bittersweet. I enjoy doing this podcast. I have a lot of fun with it, but we have other creative things we'd like to do, and
yeah, I'm not saying it won't be like there's other things I think we could do that are cool that we might get to eventually, but I think there's other type of content that could come from horror that we could discuss and talk about and delve
rather
into.
than doing a weekly show where we just take a show and we take a movie and we just talk about it for an hour.
I think there's a lot of content that I feel like Mike and I can really tap into that we should discuss more about. And I think that as much fun as it is to talk about movies, I think the best thing about watching movies is the creativity that flows through you when you get it and you say, I want to do this too. And I think doing this weekly can be a little stunting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea of maybe doing a solo episode every once in a while, or maybe seeing if we find something that we're both passionate about talking about and doing an episode sometime. But it definitely we're not doing weekly, from the beginning. Weekly has been fun because it's like, every week we get to sit down and we get to talk about we do it every day at work, to be completely honest, but it's fun to do it and share it with other people and sharing our passion with other people about horror. But doing it weekly from the beginning, I knew that this was going to be exhausting. Yeah.
It's
and
tougher when it comes to getting things done last minute with a lot of other priorities to assess.
Yeah, and being completely transparent, at the beginning of this, you were editing all of these.
Yeah, I did a lot of editing.
And that was tough.
I had to do all the artwork, and I was trying to make it very different, which at this point you can tell I got very lazy. Like, no, this is good for now. And
when you're talking
the
about
artwork was tough to try to make work and get an episode done if it's an hour and a half long. Like I have a lot of responsibilities, and that's
also kind of the other thing. It's just like, you're editing an hour and 40 minute long. The last episode was a long episode, but you have your own YouTube channel where you do your own things that you enjoy doing. You interview people, talk about awesome things, and do awesome work over there. And even those are even more involved than these are.
Yeah.
More effects, more, jokes. The editing is much more complex than it is for this. That plus our job, which is time consuming and physical, as well as, you are very, very into fitness and doing that, and, all the other things you have to do in your life. That's a lot of stuff to do, and it doesn't leave a lot of time to relax.
Yeah.
And to take a moment. And I think that's an important thing to think about.
Yeah, I agree.
So I won't say that this is goodbye, but it will be a see you later.
It will be definitely, the structure will be gone. There's not going to be a structured weekly thing. I guarantee there's going to be a film that comes out recently where it's going to be like, we should talk about this. Like the quick carnages. Or you and I will
watch something that's really cool that we're going to want to talk about.
Yeah, I would expect to say once in a while we'll do like a quick carnage for a film we really want to discuss. Or maybe for a film that like we've talked about doing like Hereditary and Midsommar as like a back-to-back because you haven't seen Midsommar and I haven't seen Hereditary. I think that's something we'll probably do.
You were talking about doing a more like a talk show, not talk showy, but like we do like more in-person things. Like you wanted to do something involving
I would enjoy
Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah, I would enjoy to do like get an actual camera, set it up, have start filming like a legitimate in-person episode. I think that would make things really cool, and that's definitely something I would look forward to doing with a group of people, and also have like a separate area to kind of have like a nice ambiance behind us too, which would be cool.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
That's something that we'll be planning for. I wouldn't expect to see it anytime soon, but I think it's definitely something it's gonna happen. I will promise that there's going to be a campfire episode at some point of Freddy vs. Jason. I promise that.
That was one that when we were talking about this earlier on in the show, we were talking about like, we were talking about like doing Jason and all that stuff, and we're like, were we ever gonna get to like Freddy vs. Jason? And you're like, well, if we would do Freddy vs. Jason, I want to have like a campfire and also not just me and you.
Yeah.
You had other people you
I
wanted to
know a
bring
lot
into
of
the
people
fold.
that will talk about that movie.
Yeah, so it's like that was one that we were planning as like kind of an event episode anyways,
Yeah.
but we just never got to it this year.
I mean, I just don't have a camera that'll sit that long for an hour and record.
It's just kind of amazing to me that just think about like we did this every week for not almost a year, but from the majority of a year.
Yeah, if it was April, it'd be a full year.
Yeah.
We did 36 episodes. It's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm happy with what we did.
I am too.
I'm happy to also take a step back too.
Even when we talk, even when we had episodes about movies I didn't like or you didn't like, at the end of the day we still had a good time talking about them. And I think that the movies are cool, and I like talking about movies and stuff. But this was always to me about the conversation and having fun.
Yeah,
discussing these things. It's not just talking about. I don't want to like we were just gonna sit there and be pretentious about movies and stuff. Like we wanted to have a good time, and I think that we did do that.
Yeah.
Things get a little bit stressful. We both have busy schedules and deal with our own personal issues, and this being a weekly thing was just another level of stress.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important to take a step back and take inventory of your life and make sure that you're allocating your time towards the things that really, really are important, not just important to you, but also things that aren't hurting you or your creativity.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing to me is just hindrance on creativity. I want to feel like when I watch a film, I get this drive to do something that resembles what I had seen and spark this imagination. And I feel like if I'm watching a film every week and I get this spark and nothing I can do with it is just record talking about the movie, it's like, well, what do I want to do about that other bit that makes me feel like I have to really showcase my art in some way, whether it's photography, video, editing, drawing, anything. I want to be able to do something with it, and I'm not getting enough of that right now. And I feel like there's stuff that if you and I brainstorm, we can do some really cool shit, and I would rather us focus on that for a while and think of cooler things to reformat our content.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that's something to look forward to. I think it's been nice with the podcasting. I think there's a decent amount of traction with people coming back to me talking about watching the episodes, the stuff they like about it. And I know it's not as much on the YouTube, but I think it's content-wise, it'd be more fulfilling if we get some cool stuff that we could say like, damn, we actually did that. That's pretty sick. Yeah.
Because you have your passions for especially like comedy and skits. And I want to one of my biggest dreams in life is to become a writer and a director, do filmmaking stuff, and I think that that's something that we can probably tap into and have some fun. Yeah, I definitely think some creatively stimulating content for us both. Yeah, I definitely think there's some cool shit that we can discuss. That I have some ideas that we have to get down on paper. I have a few things written up, but definitely stay tuned. I wouldn't say that Scared Stiff is done. Scared Stiff is still probably going to keep going for a bit, but for now, the weekly podcasts are definitely taking a seat. Yeah. So, definitely stay tuned and keep in touch. I'm not saying there's not going to be some more podcasts coming out, but it's definitely going to be very different. I'll say that much. Much more sporadic, if anything. Yes. So, thank you for joining us for this episode. Thank you for joining us for the past... well, fucking 38 or whatever, however many 38 to 40 of them. It's been a lot of fun, but we're ready for a change. I hope you are too. Thank you so much, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.